I'm Dr. Lorenzato. Allergies are about the interaction between our immune systems and our environment. It is the engagement of the food we eat and the particles that we breathe in with our complex system of white cells that produce immunoglobins and cytokines, messengers between their cells. We will explore the essential things you need to know to control your allergies and give you a gateway for further understanding. There's some minimal terminology we really need to understand. White cells and red cells flow through our system. Red cells are in our blood vessels carrying oxygen. White cells are responsible for most of our immune surveillance, much of the communication of finer issues of our immune system. White cells are multiple types, including T cells and B cells and dendritic cells, are the three we'll focus here. Antigens are the triggers of an immune reaction. They are the foreign particles. They are things like pollen and dust, molecules that cause reaction in our system to be recognized as foreigners. The immunoglobins are a class of proteins. They're very interesting because they're composed of several parts, and they communicate between white cells. They function to identify foreign particles and trigger immune responses. They are essential to our understanding here. Histamine is a small, very simple molecule that is released from white cells in part of the immune response. It results in the swelling and itching we frequently feel when cells swell up of our vascular system or around our vascular system. Frequently they leak, causing more secretions. So histamine is responsible for a lot of the responses we have to the common cold. Cytokines are a group of proteins that are involved in communicating between all nucleated cells in our body and the immune system. They're communicating between the immune system cells as well. They're almost everywhere. Lymph nodes are very important to know about. Our lymphatic systems are vessels that run through our tissue, and the vessels interrupted intermittently with nodes or collections of white cells. They function very specifically at helping white cells communicate with each other. And as white cells do their job sometimes of taking debris away, the debris is moved up through the lymphatic system. Eventually, the lymphatic fluid drains into our venous system and gets mixed into our blood. So the immune system has two basic components: an early response before we have figured out specifically how to attack the antigen or to use the antigen to attack the invader. It is called our innate immune response, and it is marked by just general release of histamine, swelling, itching, lots of secretions, or the barrier of our skin. All this is a part of our innate immune response. The adaptive response is more targeted, is marked by the orchestration of our immune cells to specific targets. And there is a large library of immunoglobins, of white cell molecules that as we recognize foreign particles, we can keep a library of those foreigners, in essence, and maintain the ability to create immunoglobins rapidly from those cells, from those molecules, cluing in our cells how to respond. IgE is it's usually found in very low concentrations in the blood, except in individuals that are having an immune response and in those that continue to have allergies. So the IgE to IgG ratio, or the IgE to all the other immunoglobins, are used to understand how much of your response is allergic and immune response and how much of it's due to other things. In summary, white cells fight infection, create immune response, release immunoglobulin E in the case of allergies particularly. Histamine is released in the innate and in the adaptive immune response, but particularly innate immune response with lots of swelling, itching, more secretions partially as a result. Cytokines are communicating molecules between all nucleated cells in your body, but also between your immunoglobins. And allergies is something we've all experienced just with a common cold, yet some people maintain a higher population of those IgE immunoglobins, and they trigger more in-depth immune response, sometimes even when the antigen has nothing to do with the immune response we have. So sometimes a different, say a food particle will cause us to have an itchiness on our skin, very different area. The IgEs are involved elevation of the IgEs are involved in asthma and allergic head reactions and food allergies and chronic histamine release resulting in chronic itching problems, some skin disruptions. They're also elevated when we get exposed to parasites, so a differential diagnosis of a high IgEs can be parasitic response. And they can be involved in overwhelming immune response. IgEs are bind to mast cells and basophils, but to other cells as well. The mast cells and basophils are very prominent in the immune response in allergies. So part of the IgE molecule has an anchoring part that helps it anchor in the immune system cells to facilitate aggregation of cells and communication as needed. So generally our immune system is in harmony, fighting foreigners from getting us, but occasionally it seems to be overexuberant, causing us misery through all the response, particularly, as I said, the histamine response. The receptors to IgE are also critical, and their populations will determine quite a bit of how our immune system, how we sense our immune system. Considering that the majority of immune responses must be in the gut, that the majority of our white cells has to protect from foreigner invaders of our intestine, it is easy to understand why we might have oral allergy syndromes or why what we eat might affect our whole immune system and the level of immunity we have to other things. In this light, consider our evolutionary response that the immune system has evolved in context with our food system to define what things we accept and what things we reject, what things represent invaders, what represents just good food. So some foods that would make sense we might have some allergic response to, that we're new to our system and we haven't evolved to have a system that would recognize them as not being something that we should accept as food. Meats, vegetables, and most nuts, you would think, would be normal over hundreds of thousands of years, things we would accept, whereas gluten, which is in a protein in wheat, barley, and rye, casein, the protein in milk, and soy proteins, all are suspect, might be considered as foreigners, particularly in the large degree we have them relative to what humans were exposed to these in the past, as well as the nightshades, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, and peppers that are all from the New World. The target organs for inflammation generally are what we recognize, but sometimes we'll have aches and pains in our muscles and joints that could also just be part of an immune response. We should consider our personal history for infection, which will sometimes explain why we have a population of white cells predominantly in one tissue, and the immune history that we've had in response to those infections. A high-efficiency particulate filter, or HEPA filter, is essential in good management of allergies. Otherwise, with a poor filter, you'll pull up food dust particles and spread them around the room, making your allergies worse. HEPA filters are also in air conditioning and heating systems. The simplest thing is avoid antigens, barriers sometimes covering things, avoiding rugs if you have dust allergies, animal hair and dander, pollen and dust, mold, all these things can sometimes simply be avoided. Avoid histamine-rich foods. Time of the internet, just go look for a list of histamine-rich foods. These include things like red wine, champagne, beef jerky, fresh strawberries, many different things. The immune modulators that we most commonly use are antihistamines and decongestants. The decongestants can cause blood vessels to tighten down, preventing flow of blood to the surface of membranes, and therefore less delivery of white cells and less delivery of fluid to facilitate leaking that can happen in the presence of histamine. And of course, antihistamines can help with the release of histamines from the white cell, but not from histamines that we eat. Steroid nasal sprays can be very valuable. I like to just present them as causing the white cells to dissipate more and not communicate with each other rather than eradicating the white cells. This is a pretty good model. In conclusion, immunoglobin E's are critical aspects of the immune system that effectively target antigens or foreign particles in our system. In allergies, IgEs are generally elevated. Allergies can be global, affecting all of our body, particularly those brought on from intestinal allergens, or they can be focal, where a group of white cells established a more or less focal immune response. Oral allergy syndrome is brought on when pollen and other things we breathe or are exposed to, like latex, stimulate a cross-reactivity with food we eat, causing foods, particularly when they're not cooked, to cause allergic reactions. This plays in with my understanding of the paleo diet, and the model of the paleo diet would suggest that foods that are new to us relative to hundreds of generations of humans are more likely to have immune reactivity. Therefore, the nightshades from the New World, foods that include wheat with gluten, are more likely to have underlying immune reactivity that is rather subtle. We've outlined the most essential ways to manage allergic response on the average hay fever or congestion after a viral particle stimulates our immune system. And we've given you some insights to a new way of thinking about the food you eat as something that does stimulate your immune system and should really be looked at in this context. Thank you. See you in another video.